Welcome back to part 2. At this point, I want to go to the text again, 2 Timothy 3, verses 1 through 9, and address the reasons behind, some of the reasons behind the deep divide, the anger, and the hatred manifest through cultural wars, protests in our country, which are just symptoms of a core problem. And at that core problem is our inherited sinful nature from original sin. The essence of original sin is selfishness. We're just selfish people. We want our way, regardless. We want our agenda. And again, it's not even about Donald Trump. Donald Trump is just a symptom of what has always existed in this country that's never been dealt with proficiently throughout history. Best way to deal with it is through racial reconciliation. Cape Town, South Africa attempted those measures. And they're better off. They're not where they need to be, but they're better off through their foundation of racial healing. So I want to look at the character that's being reflected in this country through 2 Timothy 3 verses 1 through 9 that is symptomatic of a deeper core problem, just as Cain slew Abel because he hated Abel, because Abel was righteous and approved of God because of his righteousness. But at the core of the problem is just evil. Evil is a spiritual disease. And racism comes from evil. It's demonic, and it cannot be broken with secular tools and mandates. It must be broken by the gospel of Jesus Christ. Now, let's outline and elaborate on these symptoms that are similar to the characteristics that we see in America today. And let's look at what we need to do. 2 Timothy 3, verse 1. This know also, speaking to his son in the ministry, Timothy, and those that would read this epistle, that in the last days began at Pentecost. So don't look at it in terms of ecclesiology. Somewhere down the road, as portrayed in the book of Revelations, it began 2,000 years ago at Pentecost, because there Peter uttered the prophecy that said in the last days, God will pour out his spirit upon all flesh. So we've been in the last days for the last 2,000 years. That in the last days, perilous times or dangerous times, volatile times shall come. And here's the reason why. Because of toxic character. For men shall be lovers of their own selves. Narcissistic. I coin a cliche and phrase from common culture, dialect, jargon. Lovers of your own self is being narcissistic. Being narcissistic means that you're so infatuated, so in love with your selfish self that you're doing yourself. Think about that. Covetous. Stricken with a contagion for greed. Boasters, bragging about everything. Proud, in the sense of being egotistical. Blasphemous, abusing in language and character and behavior the things of God. Misinterpreting God's word to justify your sinful life. Disobedient to parents. Unthankful. Unholy, the opposite of Being holy is being unclean. That is, base, vile activities from sexual activity to all other perversions are commonly accepted without natural affection, let alone being infused with the Spirit of God to love. Truce breakers, no commitment. You break your word, you change your word. False accusers, gossiping and lying about people and making what actually happened even worse. Incontented, without self-control, no discipline. Fierce, filled with rage and anger, despisers of those that are good. Meaning you're intimidated by righteous, good people. Traitors will stab a person in the back in a heartbeat. Will betray people without a cause. Heady, you got a big head. You can hardly walk through a door because you're so overly infatuated about yourself. High-minded. You are worse than an elite. You think you're better than everybody around you. Lovers of pleasures more than lovers of God. You avoid pain to seek pleasure. You expend energy and activity, money, uselessly on clubbing and partying, on looking superficially good. You have a form of godliness. Superficially, you call yourself a Christian, but you deny the power of that, what it means to be a Christian. Having a form of godliness on the surface, but denying the power thereof, which is the power of the gospel to transform your life. And here's what Paul tells Timothy. From those people who exemplify those characteristics, he says, turn away, because they're a contagion. They are a toxic contagion. Stay away from them, avoid them, rub shoulders, get eyeball to eyeball with positive, disciplined people who focus on the gospel of Jesus Christ and look at the fact that the glass is not half empty, it's half full. They don't have tunnel vision. They see the big picture. They don't have an attitude. They don't take issue with other people's issues. Because they see the big picture, they have a positive outlook on life. And then Paul goes on to say, he describes their perverted sexual activity. For of this sort are they who creep into houses, married people, single people, creeping around lustfully, engaging in perverted sexual activities, as Paul mentions to Timothy, for pleasure. And they enter into bondage, leading captive silly women, naive, gullible women, laden with sins, led away into divers lusts. They're led away into all kinds of perverted activity. Now he's using an Old Testament example in verse 8. Now as Jannes and Jambres withstood Moses, so do these also resist the truth. For this culture today, truth is stranger than fiction, and a lie is compelling. Because people have been so conditioned by lies, when you tell them the truth, they think it's a fable. It's hard to get truth across to people today because, as Kanye West has spoken, we're free thinkers. And we play with those terms philosophically. But all free thinking means is all truth is relative. There's no absolute truth. And you know Jesus is sovereign. And he is the ultimate absolute truth. And so we're like Pilate standing before Jesus. What is truth? Men of corrupt minds, reprobate, perverted in their faith, but they shall proceed no further, for their folly shall be manifested unto all men, as theirs was also. It's going to end.